So, guys, I'm here with Sadia Khan. Thank you for joining. I'm looking forward to interviewing you, getting to catch up and meet you a little bit more. Before we get into your background, I just want to start with who were you as a kid? I know you grew up in London. You're originally from Pakistan, but tell me about your life growing up. What was Sadia like in early days?
Oh, what a great question. I don't think I've ever been asked that, but a great question to start with. I was the middle child of 5 siblings. So there's 4 girls and then there's a boy at the end. And when you're the middle child, you are essentially invisible because you're not old enough to be respected by the younger ones, and you're not young and cute enough to be loved by the older ones. So you're literally just there to balance out the seesaw between the two that actually like each other. So it was really difficult, if I'm honest. I found it really hard. I found myself being incredibly attention seeking with my parents. So I would do things like refuse to eat what mum's made just so she makes something special for me, or ask my dad to drive me somewhere really far just to see if he would do it. So I was always toxic. Even as a child, I was a bit crazy. But then what happened is I felt really invisible. But in the process of feeling really invisible at home, it kind of pushes you to create a family outside of the home. So I had lots of friends. I always had a really big network of friends. And I was particularly more male friends because I was always a little bit distant with my sisters, but slightly closer to my brother. So I remember seeing women as a bit like, oh, we're going to fall out. But with men, I felt safer. And in the process of acquiring so many friends and male friends, I ended up gathering all of this data that's really helped me in my career now. So I seem to have, which I don't realize I have, but a lot of people will say you seem to understand the male brain a bit more than the average woman. Yeah. And I would say it's just because of early exposure. It's kind of being separated from women, either voluntarily or involuntarily, and then just finding a bit of safe home with the guys. I would end up always being around guys and they would tell me everything. And when you hear everything and you see everything, as a woman, you can connect the dots. And so that was my early training ground into the career I have now.
I love it. Beautiful. And it's evident, from the content that I've seen, we've had conversations before, and from just the way you express yourself, it's clear that you have a good understanding of both the male mind and the female mind. I'm curious as to when you made the transition to maybe having a lot of guy friends, but the guy friends really liking you. When did you become beautiful, or were you always beautiful, I guess is the best way of putting it.
It's a weird question to answer, but I was always hot. Not really. No, but do you know what it was? I was really good at friend zoning myself. And I still am to this day. If you speak to my guy friends, and even my partner, I was speaking to him about this today, and I said to him, babe, how come you don't mind that I have male friends? And it's because I always answer the phone in front of him. And it's very apparent that I friend zone myself. It's impossible for them to have sexual attraction after a while, because what I will do is I automatically kind of self-deprecate. I'll be like, oh God, you don't want to be with someone like me. I'm so crazy and I'm so this, I'm so bad and I'm terrible at sex. You'll never want to have sex with me. I'm awful. So I always do that. I'm like, I'm disgusting. You don't want to see me. You'll need therapy after. So I always self-deprecate. But the other thing I try and do is I try and resolve the problems with women. So what will happen is they might be seeing somebody, and because I'm like, no, try and make it work, do this, do that, and I might introduce them to women, I really encourage them to be with other women. So they end up seeing me as a bit of a wingman. The moment a woman introduces you to another man, she automatically, you kind of realize it's not possible. She's actually sending you to another woman. So they unconsciously think that they friend zone me. They're like, oh, she's one of the boys. Oh, she introduces me to girls, but really it was my trick all along. So I'll introduce them to girls. I'll be really, really playful, like on a night out, I'll help them meet other girls. I kind of make sure I desexualize myself as much as possible.
So providing value in another way, so you can change the frame of how they see you, which is powerful, right? Any man that knows he has a beautiful woman that's helping him get other women, he's going to value that more so than maybe a one-night stand or a quick fling.
Absolutely. And what happens is men that say, oh, you men and women can't be friends, they haven't been around enough valuable women. When you're only around women who are only useful for sex, then what happens is when they don't give you sex, you lose interest. But when they offer something beyond that, what happens is you're like, this is really interesting. She can actually really help me understand this. She can take me here. I understand my girlfriend better by talking to her. So it's actually, it gives you value that you didn't know you could have in a connection. But as long as that woman offers some value.
That makes sense. What do you look for in a guy friend that you're going to have in your life? What kind of qualities do you want him to have?
I think with with my guy friends that I have, all of my guy friends that I tend to have, is they have some level of self-control. They're not the first to kind of give in to every single girl in sight. They don't glorify sex, and they don't glorify women. And why that's so important amongst my guy friends is, then I feel like just because you look a certain way or they might find you attractive, that's not enough for them to create an attachment. They actually need to kind of get on, and if they see me like always screaming and shouting and being annoying, it's enough for them not to be attracted anymore. But if I have a guy friend who's in awe, it becomes difficult to create a connection. So what I tend to look for in guy friends is men that don't prioritize women in sex. That's not their number one priority in life. Men that tend to have a lot to bring to the table outside of flirting and outside of compliments. They actually have structured conversations, and they're not nervous to speak to me. Most of my guy friends are dating girls that look like me or better. So it's not like, oh my God, Sadia's here. Sometimes I'm like, guys, why is no one looking at me? Because they're so used to women like me. So I tend to look for people who don't place looks on a pedestal and don't place sex on a pedestal. And that's the type of man I tend to attach to more.
Very important. I love that.
Yeah.
You know, one of the biggest things I hear from my female friends who are beautiful is like, if a guy can just be calm around me. When a guy puts my looks on a pedestal, it's so uncomfortable.
It's uncomfortable, and it comes across as needy and thirsty and all of these things. Whereas when you recognize you're beautiful, but that's not the glue for the connection, you automatically you let go, you relax, and you kind of can be yourself and they can be themselves, and something starts to grow. But when he makes that the focal point, and you can feel he's trying it, or feel he's always trying to seek some kind of physical connection, it automatically puts you on guard. So I would say just remembering that looks are not the most important, and they're not the most intimidating quality in another person.
How important is calmness for a man to have when he's interacting with you, a man that you're interested in romantically?
Calmness as in like reserved, or calm and just a temperament?
More and more in energy. So he can be loud and whatever else, but more of a grounded, calm energy. Is that something you look for?
Absolutely. I think when I was younger, I did used to look for that really boisterous kind of life and soul of the party when I was younger. And I used to see it as, because I have a lot of energy and that works really well. It's poisonous. When you have a man that's life and soul of the party, it means that he's also the guy that doesn't want to leave the club at a reasonable hour. He wants to pour the drinks down the girls' throats, and he is automatic anxiety. Yeah. So he will literally leave you stressed. Whereas as you mature, and once you date somebody who is calm and is reserved and can see himself out of situations that don't serve him, it is life-changing because it rubs off onto you. You start to value your own time and energy because they tend to. What calm men tend to do is they only be in places which serve them. They remove themselves from environments because they're not trying to be seen. They don't need to be everywhere. They're okay to just go home at a reasonable hour, wake up early. So what they'll do is they provide a template for a very structured life, and you can go to them for advice. So they end up leading without trying.
Wow.
Yeah.
Sounds like you've maybe dated some of the other types before.
I think when I was younger, I used to, because I said, "Oh, you're so funny," and then you realize, funny, that's the most annoying quality. At the time, it's nice. It's like, but it's a clown, and in the long run, in the long run, it becomes a bit of a clown. Of course, have a sense of humor, but it's when the man is just life and soul of the party, and he's just the clown, and he is just out and about everywhere. It becomes very difficult to take him serious. It becomes very difficult. Yes. Whereas when he's calm and reserved, you don't have to micromanage him. He manages himself. He's not in places that disrupt his peace. He's not around people that can, completely swerve him from his long-term goals or from his direction. So you don't have to micromanage. It's just a lot easier.
Beautiful. It's the difference between a jester and a king.
Yeah,
that's what
exactly
I'm feeling.
That. Yeah, exactly that. I would say it's exactly that. The jester is really great for for 5 minutes and when you just enjoy their company, but it's there is no long-term positive outcome from that guy. Whereas the guy that reserves his energy and preserves his energy, the long-term outcome is even if it doesn't work out, you learn how to value your time and energy more because that's what they do with their time and energy.
Beautiful. That is leadership. I love that.
Yeah.
Tell me this. When did you first fall in love?
Oh God, I was so dumb. I don't know if I can classify any of that as love until you know what I would say, and I'll be honest with you, I am very much in love with my partner. But what I would say is, I don't have children, and I believe that true love occurs when you create meaning and purpose with somebody. And
Mm,
nothing gives more instant meaning and purpose than having children. So I would, and I don't think he would disagree with me, I think I would say that I reserve that word for when we've created a very shared meaning and purpose. Now, for some people, that can be a business, and it can be, buying a house together. It can be this. For me, that is children. I do love my partner, but I would say that the true form of love comes when you recreate. Up until that point, the first time I probably fell in crush, or like, thought I was in love or whatever it is, I was a very late bloomer. I was around 23, 24 years old, and it took me a long time, and I was crazy. I didn't know that love was like that. So I thought I'm going to fall in love and it's going to be so nice and we're going to be best friends. I was a psychopath. I was so crazy jealous. I was so anxious. I was such a nut job that I think it didn't last very long because I was psycho. And I realized, for me, because of my own kind of maybe being left out growing up and not being quite
hmm
so secure with myself, love meant anxiety. I had an equal
mm,
level of passion as I did anxiety and stress.
yes.
So what happened is I started to learn that love isn't fun for me. And it's only when, like, around a couple of years later, maybe when I met my partner about 3, 4 years ago, and then I was like, you know what? Love can feel calm. It can feel
Well,
calm. Up until that point, it was just anxiety. There was lots of jealousy. There was lots of stressing. There was lots of worry that they're going to hurt me. And I couldn't enjoy it. So the first time I
mm,
fell in love, I felt like I fell into a indication of my anxiety and my insecurities.
wow, powerful.
Yeah.
So, how has he been able to provide a space of more calm, grounded, safe love with this partnership? What has he been able to do?
Um, I think it's mainly because he's so self-regulated. When a man is naturally quite self-regulated, what happens is you don't have to worry that they're going to do this when you're not around, they're going to do that when you're not around, they're not going to love you, they're going to do this. That anxiety disappears when you know that they've got a lot of self-control. The other thing that he's naturally good at, and I think most men, if they realize this, they would realize that the woman starts to relax, is when you naturally check in on a woman and you naturally show concern for her feelings and her well-being, she will no longer be suspicious. When she knows that you naturally care if she got home okay, you naturally care if she's eaten, you naturally care to check in on her and how her days went, what will happen is she doesn't have to remind you to love her. I don't have to really say to him, you haven't called me, or you haven't checked on me, or you haven't made sure I got on the flight safe. It happens naturally. So because of that, I tend to calm down. You start to believe that they will love and trust and respect what you have in your absence. But when it's a man that you have to remind him to call you, remind him to text you, remind him to care about you, you worry about what happens in your absence.
Wow, powerful, powerful.
Yeah?
Communication is key. I love that.
Communication is communication with consideration really works.
Mm, love that. Tell me your views on long-term monogamy. Is that something that you feel is possible, one for yourself and also for a partner? Because I'm sure the type of men you are interacting with, or the type of partner you have, is someone who is a very high-level man. So I want to hear more of your thoughts on that.
Well, one of my things I would say is that the more attractive a woman is, or more like valuable a woman is, the more likely she is to be cheated on. And the reason I say that is because the type of man she'll naturally connect with. What will happen is when you are, and I'm talking more like when I was 21, 22 years old or whatever it was, what would happen is only risk taker kind of men would come and approach me. That good, wholesome guy who wants a committed relationship would be a little bit intimidated, or a little bit like, oh, I can't be bothered to be rejected by a girl, like I haven't got time for this. But the guy that will risk it all to be with an attractive woman would be the filter. I would only get that kind of guy. So what would happen is, by default, I would only be with the guys that firstly really want to be with an attractive woman and have the confidence to be with an attractive woman. So what would happen is I would be more on edge. I would be aware of that. I would be so aware of that. Whereas I know that if I was overweight or very like plain Jane, chances are the guy that really values sex and really wants to be with, really loves women, he wouldn't go for me. So I, by default, will only kind of be around the men that value women and sex and all this stuff. So I was really anxious with that, and I thought monogamy wasn't possible. I still don't know. Yeah, if I'm being totally honest, I still don't know, because it depends on the type of woman and it depends on the type of man. And I think if you have the man that has values, who naturally have values where their partner's well-being means more than pleasure seeking, what will happen is you can have monogamy. But when you have a man who thinks that as long as she doesn't know, it's okay and she'll be fine, and worst case, where his desires take over the well-being and respect of the relationship, you'll always suffer. So it really just does depend, unfortunately, on that. But I would say the more valuable the woman is, the more likely she is to be cheated on.
That makes sense. I agree with that.
Yeah, and people always think the opposite. They're like, oh, who would cheat on her? She's so amazing. Why would someone cheat on Giselle? Why would someone cheat on Adriana Lima? And I was like, because imagine the type of courage it takes to be with a supermodel. It takes a man who loves women, loves sex. So imagine. So it has to be that guy, and you are not the only supermodel in the world, unfortunately.
Yes. And it tends to be a guy with a certain temperament, a certain level of aggressiveness and killer instinct that goes for a woman like that. And so it's hard to turn off that side.
Yeah. Whereas if you take a man that marries somebody like Oprah, it's going to be like, okay, sex is probably not the most important thing in a connection. I'm not saying that she's not great. She's probably great at sex, probably way better than me. But I'm just saying in general, he wouldn't assume that. I can't even take my socks off.
Don't give me a visual of Oprah having sex again, okay?
Yeah, so that's why I would imagine that those relationships tend to attract a man who is more willing to forego sexual desire.
One of the things I told you when you and I first chatted is that the community of men I work with tend to be business owners, higher value men, higher functioning men as far as finances go, what they want out of life. They're not looking for the white picket fence and the stereotypical life. But one thing I found over the years of coaching men is that a lot of very wealthy men are bad with women. And they're not bad at sleeping with women, but they're bad at maintaining a healthy long-term monogamous relationship. Why do you think that is? Why do you think so many wealthy men are bad with women?
I think what they sometimes don't realize with wealthy men is they've used work and success as a coping mechanism. There might be an underlying low self-esteem. And by attaining a level of success that requires disconnection from people, it requires you working hours that involve you not seeing your wife all the time. It requires you a level of status. It requires a little bit of emotional detachment. What happens in the process of that, they haven't really unresolved the potential driving force, which may have been some neglect or not being seen as a child or having to prove something. They haven't gotten rid of that. And that still exists in them. So what happens is they always look for coping mechanisms when life gets stressful. They look for escapisms, and women are a great source of that. And the accessibility is higher once you're abroad, once you're doing business trips, and so on and so forth. So I would say you have to look at what the driving force was behind the success, and is there an element of low self-esteem, or is there an element of coping from escapism from the real world? And if that hasn't been resolved, of course, women are always going to be able to tempt you.
That makes sense completely. Yeah. That idea of, okay, a lot of the success was disproportional for me to be able to fill a void in me. And now that the success is there, it doesn't mean the void has been filled. So kind of part two to that question.
Women. It must be found in women, or it must be found in alcohol. It must be found in something. So they're still seeking that, unfortunately.
How do you resolve that? How can you help a man fill that gap in himself, that hole in himself, to be able to be more whole where he doesn't need to seek that out?
I think having a connection with one woman which is based on authenticity. What I mean by that is if you connect with women based on and you lead with your ability to provide her a good life, or your ability to, solve her problems, or your ability to just be with someone beautiful, what will happen is you'll always feel like you're not good enough. And therefore, you'll always still have that underlying anxiety. But if you can find a woman who accepts you for you and genuinely isn't there for your lifestyle, and you can be yourself, you can totally and utterly be yourself, moody, independent, nice, caring, consider all of those facets of your personality, you can be that with one person. What will happen is the desire to connect with somebody else will decrease. But if you can't share all the parts of you with one person, all it takes is somebody else to highlight and access a different part of you for you to glorify that woman. So even
Wow.
if sexually, so even say, for example, intellectually, you can't always connect with your wife, she doesn't get it. If you start opening up to her, you create that intimacy. But if you don't, another woman who talks to you about crypto, automatically you're like, wow, she's so intelligent. I love speaking to her. And so you glorify her. Or even sexually, your wife isn't craving you as much, or you're not craving each other as much. The moment another woman shows you a little bit of sexual attention, you light up. It's about creating that level of intimacy and connection with your wife that becomes irreplaceable. And that can only come through being authentic.
I love that. The pathway oftentimes to create that intimacy is through emotional authenticity. And I think a lot of guys today online are scared or believe they shouldn't be emotionally authentic. And so, how do you think a man should express his emotions to his partner?
Here's what the online community will say. If you are vulnerable to your woman, she'll never respect you again. And oh my God, you should be terrified. No, there's nothing wrong with vulnerability. What we don't like is when a man has a disproportionate response to a scenario and loses his problem solving skills. What I mean by that is if, for example, he's lost his job, absolutely be upset, terrified, all of these things. But you take a couple of days and then you go back into problem solving. How do I fix this? How do I get a job? Become a problem solver. Now, when he's one of those people that is so overwhelmed with what's going on, he loses his ability to problem solve. He naturally loses his ability to maintain leadership. So that's where the problems lie. So whereas you can express any emotion to your woman, as long as you reassure her that you have the willingness to solve it. But if you're expressing loads of problems with no drive, no willingness, and no desire to resolve it, she will see you as a child.
Yes.
So it's a problem solving that is the issue.
Yes. I love that. What you hit the nail on the head with is that currently today in the culture of online and online dating, there is this idea. A lot of men believe that if I do share my emotions, she is going to leave me. She's going to not respect me. She's going to not care about me. But actually, one of the most powerful things a man can do is be courageous enough to show up. As I say, open kimono. This is me.
Yeah.
This is me and my weakness. This is me and my hurt. This is me and my pain. This is me and my insecurity. But what you were talking about there, on the opposite side, I know I can handle it.
Exactly that. He can tell you he's lost $20 million. He can tell you that his dad's in hospital. But the problem solving, of course, when there's bereavement is harder, but the problem solving would be is we're going to make it. And if God forbid anything happens, we're going to try and keep their legacy alive or whatever it is. They find a way to solve problems, which is super attractive. But this whole idea that you can never be vulnerable with a woman, she'll take advantage and all that stuff, it creates that lack of emotional intimacy I was talking about that leads to a man straying. If I feel like I can't tell my woman about my problems, I'm going to think, oh, who do I speak to? I know, I'll speak to so-and-so. She won't judge me. And then all of a sudden get attached to this random friend of mine. Full self-disclosure is essential for connection.
Love that. Why do you think that is so not the narrative today? There's a lot of masculine heroes today online. And a lot of men, when they come into my program, I'm speaking with them, that's the mindset they believe they have. It's like, I got to work hard. I got to make lots of money. I got to never share my emotions with my woman. I have to handle it all myself, which actually leads to an inability for their partner, the female, to actually feel important in the relationship. Because one thing I've seen in my life is that my partners, previous and my current one today, when they're able to be that person to open up to, they feel empowered. They feel important. They feel like, wow, I'm playing a part in my man's success. And it gives them a purpose that's deep.
Yeah, absolutely. They feel connected to you.
Yes, completely.
Yeah. So what's happened with the manosphere and the red pill stuff, essentially it is led by, and I include all of them, and I'm good friends with like Andrew and stuff, so this is no disrespect, but it's led by men who don't know what good women look like.
Yes.
At all. And completely. I'm saying this as somebody who speaks to Andrew on a regular basis, who speaks to a lot of people on a regular basis. They don't know what good women look like, sound like, talk like. They don't know. They only know maybe they were rejected as young, so they never got to access that pretty girl in school or whatever. And as they got older, they then accessed the gold digger. And so when they became successful, so of course, treat them mean, keep them keen, and of course, throwing money at a gold digger works great. Of course, all you have to do is pay her mom's rent and she'll suck your dick. It's amazing. So that's what they know. But the reality is, when good women come into your life, they can't be bought. And with good women, they don't like just financial intimacy. They want to connect with you on deeper levels. They want to know what's going on in your mind. They want to know how they can soothe you in different ways, rather than you just deal with that and I don't show your emotions and I'm just using you and I'm going to cheat on you with somebody who's got more money if you're not top of your range. So what happens is these men start to think that if they've got more money than other men around her, that means he's won and there's no way she'll go anywhere. The reality is, if you don't emotionally invest, it doesn't matter. She'll cheat on you with a gardener. She'll cheat on you with, I have successful clients who, after a divorce or whatever it is, will walk in on their ex-wife having sex with somebody that the reception guy. And they're like, how could you drop her standards like this? And I was like, because you're not realizing that this is not how women work. They still crave emotional intimacy unless she's a professional gold digger, in which case she will decrease. She doesn't want the emotional intimacy. She's like, why are you crying to me? Fuck off. And she won't want it. A good woman with good values and good intentions needs vulnerability to form that connection, needs time with you to form that connection, doesn't accept polygamy, doesn't say, oh yeah, you can go sleep with anyone as long as you buy me a watch. She doesn't accept that. But what this red pill kind of manosphere says is, as long as you treat her right and you pay for everything, she'll accept anything. Only if she's using you. Only. Yeah. Yes. So they teach men how to attract the worst type of women in society, and men do that. Unfortunately, they'll go for the woman that's going to use them rather than the woman that's going to actually be there when he's got a doctor's appointment or a backache. So unfortunately.
And that's one of the things I often share is, like, I feel like the advice is for the club girl or the bottle service girl. And there's nothing wrong with those professions, but it's advice for a girl who is looking to make it to the next rung of society, and not for the girl who really wants the long-term things that most men, and even a lot of very high value men, want. Is they want that partner, they want that support, they want that queen in their life, but they're taking this advice that is very much attracting the wrong type of woman, right? If you use shit, you're going to attract flies.
Exactly. It's attracting an outcome that you're not emotionally prepared for. You're not prepared for walking in on your wife using your money to take younger guys on dates that make half the money you make. You're not prepared for that, but that's the type of woman you're attracting with this advice. What happens with these men that are selling this, you've got to remember they're also usually selling a course on how to get rich quick. So they want to glorify the side of being rich, whereas I don't make money from glorifying that. And I can honestly tell you, the reality is the CEOs and the successful men have the worst luck when it comes to women, because they filter out good women because of their lifestyle being so busy. They need someone who's passport ready, doesn't have working hours. Usually, what kind of woman is that? And they look for, and unfortunately with these men, because they over-identify with their success, they almost look for women that require success. So they'll look for a woman that says, you can't afford this car. And he's like, yes, I can. And you can't get me this. Yes, I can. Because they want to prove themselves. So they over-identify with their wealth and then attract women who literally just want that. And she'll replace you in 5 minutes. Unfortunately.
Powerful. I love this. And I love the perspective that you're giving here is so powerful, because, right, there's millions of men today who are being led by a lot of great role models and mentors. You know, you talked about Andrew Tate, you talked about Fresh and Fit, some of these guys who have very great messages for men as a whole. But I think the one place where they've steered men wrong from their own experience is the type of women that they're dating. It is the Instagram models, it's the bottle chicks, it's the cam girls, and all of these girls tend to be girls who are looking not for the emotional connection, but more the financial safety and security.
And they're deluded into thinking that once they get it, they stay loyal. It's like a bottomless cup with these kind of women. Once they get it, they realize how vacuous it is, and now they want somebody else. And now they would think it's somebody else, and then there's somebody else. So with these type of women, you can never give them enough. And this is not in any kind of racially or anything like that, especially with Andrew's experiences a lot with Eastern European women. And there's certain cultures where they had to be emotionally detached in order for survival. The best thing is to marry for someone who will give you stability. When you come from poor kind of cultures, you have to marry for stability rather than love, because who's going to look after you? Who's going to look after your parents? So on and so forth. So working with that template just doesn't apply to the type of men that are following them, because usually the men that are following them are not from those cultures. They're from England or whatever it is, and then they're having a lot of conflict with their partners as a result. And so it's not actually working out in their favor.
I agree completely. Yeah. I want to talk about nice guys and people pleasers, and how, when that personality trait or that side of a personality shows up, how does it make women feel in general?
A nice guy without masculinity makes a woman feel incredibly uncomfortable. She feels drained. Yeah, what I mean by nice guy without masculinity is a guy who's no longer being himself. He's people pleasing. He's like, yeah, whatever you want. Okay, yeah, if you want to go there, let's go there. If you don't want to do this, let's not do this. Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, are you feeling sick today? Oh, baby, how can I help you? Like that kind of softness. What happens then until you're attached, women find that so repulsive. And the reason why we find it repulsive is we can see you're not being yourself. You're just wanting my approval. And as a result of you not being yourself, I can't be myself. If I'm with a guy who's totally people pleasing and totally trying his best to impress me and saying all the right things that he thinks will impress me, he's not being himself. So I automatically can't be myself. And I start to resent him for the mask I have to wear around him. Whereas when whereas when you're authentically yourself, and I always say with men, what they need to do is, instead of being a nice guy, is be a guy that shows a woman his world, and she can either join or she can leave. No worries. But here's my world. You take them by the hand and show them your world. But if it's what do you like to do? When do you want to do it? How are you? Are you okay? Did you wake up okay? Do you need me? Did you need me? What happens then is she doesn't get an insight into your world. And therefore she just sees you as like a burden. Whereas when you say, babe, I'm coming here, you're most welcome. I'm going to pick you up at 8. I'll see you then. I've got this restaurant that I love the sushi at. Do you want to come? They don't even ask you. The guys that are masculine don't even check if you've got allergies. They're just like, are you coming or no? If you're not coming, great, let me know. So what happens with those guys is she gets an insight into his world and then she can submit. Whereas with the nice guy, he doesn't give an insight into his world. All he does is show that he'll cater around her world. And usually her world is something that she's looking to not necessarily escape, but change. That's why we get into relationships, to adapt. And so we don't want that.
But what about happy wife, happy life guys?
Happiest women are ones that know that their partner has a set of boundaries and has a willingness to leave if she goes too far, because then it keeps her staying a woman that she respects. What I mean by this is, if I know that my husband will let me get away with absolutely anything, I might find myself in the club at 4 a.m. I might find myself in somebody's table at 2 a.m. I might find myself going on holidays and being inappropriate. I don't like that about myself, and no woman really does. Yeah, we don't like soulless behavior, man or woman. So when we have a man that has no boundaries, we become a woman we don't recognize and we're ashamed of. Whereas when we have a man that has very strict boundaries, what makes us happy is that he allows the behavior that's beneficial to us. He will say to me, I want you home at this time, I'll pick you up, because it's not safe for you. I want you to eat right. Yeah, I'm not going to let you eat into oblivion or like gain loads of weight. I want you to eat right because it's not beneficial for you. So what happens is he sets boundaries, but it's very clear those boundaries are beneficial for both me and the relationship. It's not out of egotistical control. So if I know with my partner, if I was to become overweight, he'd be the first to tell me. And as much as that might not feel good, he allows me to stay a person I respect. And so a happy wife is essentially a wife that knows her husband will encourage her to be the best version of herself.
Beautiful. Agree completely. This is so against the current narrative. When I share some videos like that talking about this, and really the danger I see oftentimes, I have married men coming to me and they've lost the polarity in their relationship. And the reason why is because they've made the movie about her. The movie is now about their wife and not about his world. And really, when they first got together, he was taking her by the hand and leading her into his world. And the moment the scene switches and all of a sudden it's like, what do you want to do? What do you want? What do you think is best? It becomes, from my perspective, I'd love to hear your side, but it becomes a scary place for a woman to be, because now all the pressure of leadership is on her. And the safety and security of that masculine containment is no longer there.
What happens with women who are given control, women aren't designed to be in control. And you'll find that even female bosses in your workplace or whatever happens, they tip into narcissism. Because what happens is their ego expands because they have to now go into survival mode, because they're now having to be the one that calls all the shots. They don't have anyone to submit to. So when you allow women to have complete reign and just do whatever it is, usually she doesn't know what she wants to do. Yeah, she doesn't know what the answer is. She's not there to problem solve. That's what you're supposed to do. And when you give her the role of problem solving, she tends to either disrespect you or become narcissistic. And there's not enough that you can do, or she'll just disrespect you and not ask you for anything because she thinks you're useless. Would you want to be married to that woman?
Me personally, no.